So wait, hey, nice, I am Rubenus, and today we're doing a bit of a different video, where this one is actually suggested by TubeOLaughs, where he asks, is it just me, or does it seem like you take a bit less damage in the bundle version of the games compared to the original 03? And so I wanted to look back at the original 0 games and see if the damage was actually changed in the remakes. So I went through the entire series, 01 to 04, and I tested both the introduction area and one of the first boss areas to see how the standard enemies and the bosses actually hurt Zero, both with contact damage and their various attacks. So, here we go. For the introduction to 01 in the remake, I noticed that standard enemies will give 1 to 2 points of contact damage and also 1 to 2 points of attack damage as well. It didn't really matter which enemy it was or what type of enemy, most would deal 1 to 2 points regardless. In the original, this was the same. I countered it with multiple enemies and the same enemy types and the same attacks, and they all dealt the same amount of damage, so there was no difference. Some games will make the introduction actually a little easier, so that it's not so punishing to new players, but Mega Man is not this type of game, and it actually proved in the first mission, where in 01, both in the remake and the original, the contact damage and the attack damage stayed the same for both the standard enemies and also the boss. The bosses typically deal 3 to 4 points of damage for both contact and attacks, and it didn't change no matter which version I played, it was still the same. And so I moved on to 02 to see if there was any difference, and there wasn't. Both the original and the remake still dealt 2 points of contact damage. I did notice that the damage in this game was upped a little bit to make it a little more difficult. Not a lot of enemies dealt 1 point of damage either for contact or attacks, but it still was the same in both versions. And so I moved on to the boss for 02 to realize that for both the remake and the original, it was still the same, 3 to 4 points for both contact damage and regular attacks from the bosses. And so with diminished hope and everything lost, I moved on to 03, mostly because I'm not a quitter. We're not gonna, don't, stop it, we're not gonna talk about it, I'm not a quitter! Anyway, the very video that this person asked me to look over is actually the one that they were correct about, where 01 and 2 were 1-to-1 perfect as far as I could tell in the first 30 minutes of game, perfectly aligned. 03 actually does have differences. In the standard enemies, the contact damage is usually around 2 points, whereas in the remake, it's 1. And the same with the regular attacks. The standard enemies will give 1 to 2 points, generally around 2 points in the original, whereas in the remake, they will only give 1. And I'd started these games fully fresh, new, not in ultra mode, not in hard mode, these are in regular mode, full new games, so there's no new game plus material that can be added to them to affect these stats. For your first boss encounter against Omega in 03, this difference is incredibly apparent, where in the remake, you only take 1 point of contact and attack damage, but in the original, you actually take the standard 3 to 4 points, so they actually did clearly change some values. As to why, I'm not entirely certain. It's not like it made this game any harder, and as a matter of fact, the 2 points was a standard in the game, so it made 03 actually a little bit easier. I'm not entirely certain if Omega's attacks stay 1 point throughout the rest of the game. I do believe they change it back to the 3 to 4 for the final fight, but it's a little weird that they actually changed this for no real reason that I can tell. To test this theory, if the introduction was manipulated just to make it a little bit easier, it's not actually true. So in the remake, when you fight against the bosses, you will take 2 to 3 points of contact damage and attack damage. Generally take about 2. However, in the original, you'll take 3 to 4. So it's almost as if for 03 and only 03, they have the damage that Zero takes for no really discernible reason, especially when they didn't manipulate the values for any other game. It doesn't really make any sense. And with hope in my eyes and a heart full of bliss, I turned to 04, only to be dashed against the rocks. It turns out the original and the remake went back to form and had the same amount of damage output. I don't know why 03 was different, but it turns out that 04 had the same damage output for both contact damage and regular attacks. This time they actually upped the damage to about 3 points. Some enemies would still deal 2 damage, but most would deal 3 this time, I guess, to make it a little bit harder. The boss will still deal 3 to 4 points of damage, so I don't know why the standard enemies deal just as much as the boss, but whatever, I didn't design the game. After mostly failing in this endeavor to see if there was any different in the damage input to 0, I wanted to see if there was actually any difference to the damage output, to maybe see if that's why the games felt easier, and it turns out that the base damage didn't change between the versions either. The base damage for the Saber is 4 points of damage to the enemies, and that's what they did in both the remake and the original. There was no difference. Even in 03, where there was a difference in the damage input, the output stayed the same. So really, I really still don't understand. It still doesn't make any sense to me why they changed 03, but they did, and here we are. I did notice that in 02 and 4, the standard enemies were a little beefier in both versions of the game, whereas in 01 and 3, they were a little weaker. In 2 and 4, they would usually take 2 saber hits to kill, whereas in 1 and 3, they would only take 1. Not really sure what this means, but it's there for reference. That's gonna do it for this video, despite us mostly failing, except for the fact that 03 was actually different for whatever reason. Tuba Laughs, thank you very much for submitting this idea, and now you get to gloat in the fact that you were correct. Thanks everybody for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. If you have any other suggestions for videos that you want me to make, particularly for the Mega Man series, please let me know in the comment section below. But until next time, wale te omnes.